They used to laugh whenever I spoke about flour, butter, and sugar, as if they were treasure. My bakery dream, they said, was only a silly hobby, something cute to pass time until I got a real job. But dreams have a funny way of proving people wrong. The moment a little money started rolling in, my lazy brother suddenly decided he was the co-founder of everything I'd built, from sleepless nights and aching hands. What he and our parents didn't realize was that, for years I'd been quietly collecting every receipt, every dollar he took, every lie they told, and every painful dinner where they looked at him with pride and at me with pity. I wasn't just baking bread, I was building a case. And when I finally walked into that courtroom, my apron might have been off, but the evidence I carried could tear down the web of lies they'd spun. If you've ever watched the people who should have been your biggest supporters become your biggest doubters, then my story will tug at the heaviest part of your heart. Click that like button if you believe someone's hard work deserves respect, and follow along, because you're about to witness the sweetest slice of family betrayal revenge you'll ever taste. My name is Janice, and since I was 6 years old, I've dreamed of owning a little bakery that smelled like warmth itself. While friends were sneaking out to parties, I was in the kitchen at midnight, elbows deep in dough, learning by trial and error. I ruined more pies than I sold, but every mistake taught me something. Every paycheck from my part-time jobs, washing dishes, folding laundry, went straight into my bakery jar. My parents, Joe and Kathy, never hid their disbelief. My dad worked long hours in construction and saw life in bricks and steel, things you could count and carry. My mom was a secretary, practical and cautious. "Sweetheart," she'd say, shaking her head with a tired smile. "Baking is a nice hobby, but no one builds a future out of frosting." And then there was my brother Isaac, 3 years older, their pride and joy. He fixed car engines and bragged about oil-stained hands. To them, he was reliable, ordinary, safe. I was the strange one who talked to yeast like it could hear me. When I announced one night that I'd been accepted to culinary school, the dinner table turned to stone. "Culinary school?" my father barked. "That's not education. That's paying someone to teach you to cook." Isaac snorted through a mouthful of mashed potatoes. "So what's the plan, Jan? Gonna start a cookie stand?" Their laughter clinked louder than the silverware. I didn't laugh. I just worked harder. I picked up double shifts, sold cupcakes from my car, saved and scraped until my hands hurt. When I made my first 18 at the farmer's market, my parents rolled their eyes. A whole day for $18? My mother scoffed. "You could make more typing reports." But 18 turned into $40, $80, $200. Small steps, like tiny loaves rising in a slow oven. The day I finally rented a tiny corner shop downtown, a space just big enough for 2 ovens and a display case, I invited my parents. They didn't come. My father's last words before hanging up that morning were, "Call us when you get a real job." 18 months later, that tiny bakery, Janice's kitchen, was glowing with soft light every morning at 6 a.m. The air smelled of cinnamon. People lined up for fresh croissants, and I could finally breathe without checking my bank balance every hour. I wasn't rich, but I was proud. And success, I learned, is like sugar. It draws attention, not all of it sweet. Isaac started dropping by, at first just once a month. He'd swagger in with a big grin, offer to carry a bag of flour, maybe pour himself a coffee to help. He'd wink at customers and say, "Our bakery's doing great." I thought it was just teasing, until "our bakery" became his favorite phrase. Soon he showed up daily, rearranging my shelves, chatting with strangers like he ran the place. One Saturday, the busiest day of all, I was neck-deep in work. Wedding cake, birthday cupcakes, a mountain of orders stacked in my head. Isaac showed up 2 hours late, smelling like cheap beer and wearing yesterday's confidence. When the crowd thinned, I asked quietly, "What's this wee business, Isaac? You don't work here." His smile vanished like sugar in rain. "Wow," he said coldly. "You really are ungrateful. Mom and Dad are gonna lose it when they hear how you treat family." And he made sure they did. That Sunday dinner was an ambush dressed in roast chicken. My parents were waiting, faces set with rehearsed sympathy. "Janice," my mother began, "we need to talk about how you're treating your brother." My father nodded. "Isaac's been helping you build that little business. He deserves recognition." "Recognition?" He'd shown up twice a week, maybe, to move boxes and sweet talk buyers, and I'd paid him for it. "Dad," I started, "I appreciate Isaac's help, but it's my bakery. Family helps family," my mother cut in sharply. "And when family helps build something, they deserve a share." Then my father sealed the deal with a blow straight to my gut. "He deserves a partnership. 50-50. That's fair. 50-50 for carrying flour." I looked at them across that table, every face familiar but colder than strangers. They didn't see me. They saw opportunity, not my dream, just my profit. "I'm not giving up half my business," I said softly. The reply was thunder. "Ungrateful," my mother snapped. "Selfish," my father added. Isaac leaned back, grinning like a king who just stole a crown. "It's fine," he said smoothly. "I'll keep helping for now. She'll come around once she realizes how much she needs me." That night, back in my tiny apartment above the bakery, I finally broke. I cried, not like a victim, but like a volcano. Years of swallowed frustration erupting at once. Then I stopped, wiped my face, brewed strong coffee, and began planning. Because I hadn't fought this far to let anyone steal what I'd baked from scratch. The next weeks were brutal. My parents showed up at the shop unannounced, pretending to check in but really keeping score. My mother would smile sweetly at customers and mention, "This is a family business, you know." My father threw in suggestions that always circled back to Isaac getting more power. And Isaac, he became unbearable. He rearranged shelves, made promises to clients I didn't agree to, and bragged to everyone about our 5-year plan. 5-year plan? The man didn't even own an apron. But what truly broke me wasn't the talk or the interference. It was the money. It began so small I almost missed it. A few dollars missing here and there after busy days. At first I blamed myself. Busy days meant rushed transactions, quick change, easy mistakes. But then I started paying closer attention. The discrepancies weren't random. They happened on days when Isaac helped out. They happened when I left him alone in front while I worked in the back kitchen. They happened consistently, predictably, like clockwork. I installed a better cash register system that tracked every transaction. The shortfalls continued, but now I could see exactly when they happened. Always during Isaac's shifts, always in round numbers that suggested someone was skimming, not miscounting. When I confronted him about it, his response was masterful manipulation. "Are you seriously accusing me of stealing?" he said, his voice dripping with hurt and disbelief. "I'm your brother, Jan. I'm here helping you build this business, working for practically nothing, and you think I'm robbing you?" He was so convincing that for a moment I doubted myself. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe the stress of running a business was making me see problems that weren't there. But then I found the bank statements. Isaac had opened an account at a different bank, thinking I'd never see the records. But when you live in Asmal Town and your childhood friend Natalie works at the credit union, information has a way of finding you. She couldn't legally show me his statements, but she could mention that it was interesting how his deposits always seemed to happen right after my busiest bakery days. That night, I hired an accountant friend named Diana to audit my books quietly. What she found hit me like a physical blow to the stomach. Over 8 months, nearly $12,000 had gone missing from my register. Not all at once. Small amounts carefully spaced out, designed to look like normal cash handling errors. But when Diana compiled it all together, the pattern was undeniable. Isaac hadn't just been stealing from me. He'd been methodical about it. Professional even. And my parents? When I finally worked up the courage to confront them with evidence, their response was worse than I could have imagined. "You're being paranoid," my mother said dismissively. "Isaac wouldn't do that. He's family. Maybe you need to look at your own bookkeeping," my father suggested. "Running a business is complicated. Maybe you're not as good with numbers as you thought." But the final insult came from Isaac himself. "Look," he said, sitting in my kitchen like he owned the place. "Maybe some money got mixed up. These things happen in family businesses. But the solution isn't accusations and suspicion. The solution is making this official. Give me the partnership I deserve and we can straighten out any confusion about the finances. A partnership." In exchange for not calling the police about his theft, he was extorting me with my parents' full support. That night, I sat in my empty bakery at 2 a.m., surrounded by ovens and mixers and dreams I'd worked so hard to build. And I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to fight this battle on their terms anymore. I was going to win it on mine. Planning revenge, I discovered, was a lot like baking. You need the right ingredients, precise measurements, perfect timing, and the patience to let everything develop slowly until it's exactly ready. I started with a foundation, protecting what was mine. First, I restructured my bakery as an LLC with myself as the sole owner and operator. Every asset, every recipe, every supplier contract, all legally documented under my name alone. I gathered every receipt showing I'd paid Isaac wages for his occasional help. I collected bank statements, tax filings, supplier contracts, insurance policies. Mountain of evidence showing that this business was mine, built with my money, my labor, my vision. Then came the beautiful part. I let Isaac think he was winning. When he demanded a formal partnership meeting with my parents present, I didn't argue. I smiled and agreed. When he brought up incorporating the business properly with him ASCO owner, I nodded thoughtfully and said I'd consider it. When my parents' pressure campaigned me at every family gathering, I started giving softer responses. Maybe you're right, I'd say. Ask has been helpful. I should probably think about the future. I'd admit family is important. I'd agree. They thought they were wearing me down. Really, I was buying time to build an unshakable legal case. The accountant, Diana, helped me document every fraudulent transaction. We found Isaac's fingerprints all over the missing money, literally in some cases, since the new register system tracked who opened the cash drawer and when. We traced his bank deposits to exact dates and amounts that matched my missing cash. But I wanted more than just proof of theft. I wanted to destroy the narrative they'd built about Isaac being an equal partner in my success. So, I documented everything. Every day, Isaac didn't show up to work, which was most of them. Every task he'd claimed to do, but actually hadn't. Every customer he'd allegedly brought in, but who'd actually found me through word of mouth or advertising I'd paid for. The security camera I'd installed after the money started disappearing became my best friend. Hours of footage showing Isaac pocketing cash, showing up hungover, leaving early, and spending more time on his phone than actually working. Meanwhile, I gathered character witnesses. Customers who'd been coming since my farmer's market days before Isaac was ever involved. Suppliers who'd watched me build relationships and grow the business entirely on my own. Other business owners who could testify to my reputation and work ethic. The final piece was the most satisfying. I started secretly recording family conversations. It's amazing what people will say when they think they're winning. Isaac bragged to my parents about how he'd deserve at least 60% once they forced me into partnership. My mother talked about how the bakery could support Isaac properly once he was officially involved. My father discussed plans to expand using Isaac's name on the loan application since he'd be the real business mind anyway. They were planning to steal my life's work and then push me out of it entirely. When I finally had everything I needed, Isaac made his move. Emboldened by months of my apparent weakness, he delivered an ultimatum. "Look, Jan," he said, standing in my bakery like he owned it. "This has gone on long enough. I want 50% ownership officially, or I'm going to have to explore other options." Other options? Like what? Stealing more money? Sabotaging my business? Running to mommy and daddy? "You know what, Isaac," I said calmly. "You're absolutely right. It's time to make this official." The smile that spread across his face was pure greed. "That's what I've been waiting to hear," he said. He was still smiling when the process server handed him the lawsuit papers 3 days later. The day of the hearing, my parents strutted into that courtroom like they were attending Isaac's coronation. They'd spent weeks telling anyone who'd listened that I was finally coming to my senses and giving Isaac the partnership he deserved. Isaac himself looked confident, almost cocky. He'd worn his best shirt and actually combed his hair. He kept whispering to my parents and gesturing toward me like I was some wayward child who'd finally been brought to heel. They had no idea what was coming. When the judge called the case, Isaac's court-appointed lawyer stood up and began what he clearly thought would be a simple partnership dispute. He painted Isaac as a dedicated family member who'd helped build a successful business, and deserved formal recognition. "Your Honor," he said, "my client has invested months of labor and brought significant value to this bakery. This is simply a matter of formalizing an existing business relationship." Then it was my turn. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Caleb Idyard, specifically because she specialized in business fraud, stood up with a folder thick enough to choke a horse. "Your Honor," she began, "this isn't a partnership dispute. This is a case of systematic theft, fraud, and attempted extortion. The first exhibit was Isaac's bank records, showing deposits that matched my missing cash down to the penny. The second was security footage of him pocketing money from my register. The third was recorded, conversations of him bragging about how much he planned to demand once he officially owned part of my business. But the Capigro was my documentation of his actual contributions versus his claims. Isaac had told everyone he'd helped build the bakery from the ground up. The evidence showed he'd worked maybe 6 hours a week for 8 months, had contributed 0 to startup costs, had brought in exactly 3 verifiable customers, and had actively stolen nearly $12,000. The judge's expression grew colder with each piece of evidence. When Isaac tried to explain himself, his story fell apart immediately. Yes, he'd taken some money, but it was compensation for unpaid work. Yes, he'd claimed to be a partner, but he deserved recognition. Yes, had demanded ownership, but it was only fair. My parents sat in the gallery, watching their golden boy destroy himself with every word. The ruling was brutal and beautiful. Isaac was ordered to repay every stolen penny, plus interest and penalties. His ownership claim was thrown out completely. The judge also granted my request for a restraining order, barring him from entering my bakery or interfering with my business. But the best part wasn't the legal victory. It was watching the moment my parents realized their favorite child was a criminal, and their silly dreamer daughter had just systematically destroyed him in court. The look on their faces was worth every sleepless night, every dollar stolen, every family dinner spent defending my right to exist. I thought that courtroom victory was the end of the story. I was wrong. A week later, my parents showed up at my bakery. For the first time in years, my mother actually tried to hume. "Janice, honey," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "You can drop the charges now. We can be a family again. Isaac has learned his lesson. He suffered enough." I almost laughed out loud. They didn't care when I was working 18-hour days to build something from nothing. They didn't care when Isaac was stealing from me. They didn't care when I was drowning in the stress of running a business while fighting off their constant demands. But now that their precious son was facing real consequences for his actions, suddenly I was family again. "You only remember I'm your daughter when it benefits you," I said, looking them straight in the eyes. "But I built this bakery without you. I survived Isaac's theft without you. I won that lawsuit without you. And I'll live my life without you too." The shock on their faces was almost comical. They'd never heard me speak to them like that, with confidence, with finality, with the voice of someone who'd finally stopped caring about their approval. "You don't mean that," my mother said weakly. "Janice, we're your parents," my father added. "No," I replied calmly. "You're Isaac's parents. You made that choice a long time ago." Then I walked them to the door, locked it behind them, and went back to frosting cupcakes for a wedding order. It was the most peaceful afternoon I'd had in years. Today, 3 years after that courtroom victory, my bakery isn't just surviving, it's thriving beyond my wildest dreams. I've opened a second location in the neighboring town with investors who believe in my vision, not my last name. I've hired 4 full-time employees who share my passion for creating something beautiful and delicious. Customers still line up before dawn for my signature sourdough, and every wedding season brings new clients who trust me with their most important celebrations. A local newspaper did a feature story about small business success in our community. I kept a copy on my office wall, not because I need the validation anymore, but because it represents something bigger than a bakery. It represents the dreams that people said were impossible, the hobby that became a career, the silly girl who proved she could build something real. As for Isaac, His reputation in our small town never recovered. Everyone knows he's the guy who tried to steal from his own sister and got caught. He moved 2 towns. Over after the court case, but news travels fast in rural communities. Last I heard, he was working at another auto shop, still living paycheck to paycheck. Still blaming everyone but himself for his problems. And my parents, they're strangers now. Strangers who occasionally drive past my bakery and slow down like they want toast stop, but never do. They chose their side in a war they started and they lost. But I didn't just win that war. It transcended it. Because the sweetest revenge isn't just proving people wrong. It's building a life so beautiful, so successful, so authentically yours, that their opinions become irrelevant. Every morning when I unlock my bakery doors and smell the fresh bread I baked before sunrise, I remember that teenage girl who dreamed of this moment while her family laughed at her silly hobby. She'd be proud of what we built together, not just the business, but the strength to cut off people who never deserved a seat at our table in the first place. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop trying to prove your worth to people who've already decided you are worthless and start proving it to yourself instead. And trust me, that victory tastes sweeter than any pastry I've ever made. Sometimes the best revenge is just living well and cutting off the toxic people who never believed in you. If this story inspired you to chase your own dreams despite the doubters, hit that like button and tell me in the comments about a time you had to choose yourself over family. Subscribe for more stories about justice, betrayal, and the power of building something beautiful from nothing. Because sometimes the sweetest victory is the one where you don't need their approval anymore.